Welcome back. My name is Candace Sanderson, and I have a question for you. When something jumps out at you, begging to be seen, do you pause and take notice? Do you pay attention to it, or do you just ignore it? This episode is about second chances. If you miss the mark the first time, the universe has a way of offering you another opportunity. I'm going to share something that I did not focus on at the time it occurred, but perhaps I should have. When the universe provided a tap on the shoulder to remind me to look, I did, finally. That reminder came from another person, Stephanie. So thank you to Stephanie. Those of you who follow me know that I am a fan of Monroe Institute outside Charlottesville, Virginia. Monroe Institute is a world leader in the exploration of consciousness. This is where I got my training wheels for my out-of-body adventures. And this is also where I received proof of our out-of-body travels when I attended the Institute's Discovery program in February 2023. Working with Judith Pennington from the Institute for the Awakened Mind, each participant in Discovery had their brain waves monitored during meditations. If you go to my YouTube homepage and you click on the playlist tab, look under a folder called Mind Mirror, and you'll see several videos I made about the Discovery program using Pennington's EEG monitoring system called Mind Mirror. You'll also see her interview with me on her Unlimited Minds series from a couple months ago. So back to Monroe, you probably heard me reference Monroe Institute's app for their meditations. It's called Expand. There is a growing community within the Expand app, and in our group chats, we are free to talk about our experiences with Monroe Sound Science and all other things related. I am addressing a chat from the Expand app. It was just a few days ago in this latter half of November 2023. One of the participants in a chat, Dominic, drew a picture of a design that he received from spirit, from the 5D, from the non-physical, however you wish to describe that dimension. But he saw this design after listening to one of the meditations on Expand called Meeting More of Yourself. If you want to find it, look under the category called Insight and Intuition. It is beautifully voiced by Anja Lysum. Dominic described maybe falling asleep, which resulted in him having a dream, but then he clarified that it was not really a dream, it was more like a vision. He struggled with finding the correct word to describe this experience. However, when he said it was like being completely awake and asleep at the same time, I thought, aha, what does that sound like? For those who are familiar with Monroe Institute and their terminology, the first thing that came to mind was Focus 10. And Focus 10 is described as mind awake, body asleep. The Institute uses focus levels to describe different states of expanded awareness, different states of consciousness. And as an FYI, a relatively new feature to the Expand app is focus levels that are found under the timer section. So just look for that stopwatch icon. And under signals, you want to swipe right until you find the focus levels 10, 12, 15, 18, and 21. And each focus level is described, and you can set the timer to play up to 2 hours of these focus levels. For me, just adding this timer section alone is worth the cost of the app. There's a free version of Expand also, and I'm pretty sure that Focus 10 is included in the free version. But back to Dominic. He talks about interesting things that occurred while he was in this meditative state. And these are things I'm quite familiar with: formlessness, a sense of knowing, seeing patterns, and then realizing that the fabric of the non physical is made up of consciousness itself. I can validate what he says. All of this checks out. But what he posted next fascinated me. I'm referring to the images he saw. Those images got my attention. Why? They are just like some of the images I've received during my channeling. Let's take a look at Dominic's hand-drawn picture of what he saw. We see a straight line, and below that line is a wavy line. Looks like a sine wave. When I saw Dominic's drawing, I chuckled. It looked so much like the drawings from the messengers. So let's take a look at what I have received. It's exactly the same thing, but I have more details superimposed over the line drawings, and I'll share that in a moment. My drawing has to do with time and consciousness, information that I'd learned from the messengers. Let me share a coincidence. Not right away, but the next day when I posted a copy of my drawings in the chat, Dominic said that he was telling a friend about his experience at that exact time when I posted. That timing is impeccable. So that's one of those winks from the universe, those coincidences that coincide, that point you in a direction of something important is happening now. Let me be truthful. I am busy doing all sorts of other things. And although I do check the community chat on the Expand app a few times a day, I don't always give it the attention it might deserve. Life gets in the way. Enter Stephanie. She posted saying that she's been following the conversations between me and Dominic. She said that our experiences really amazed her. She said she knows we're all connected, but she said it, quote, still astonishes her when she's given proof such as the connection with the drawings. This was my tap on the shoulder from the universe, offering me that second chance at what I had initially passed up. What? I thought when I read Stephanie's post. Okay, now she's piqued my interest, and I finally went back and really read Dominic's replies. I often look at the app when I'm on my phone. Why is that important? Small screen, tiny print. But now it was time for me to open my laptop that is actually connected to a larger monitor and view the chat from Dominic. When I started reading his explanations of his experience, my mind blows. He said, when referencing that first drawing, he said, this is how everything is woven together and connecting everything. He said there are endless layers of fabric where everything exists, here and now. Okay, here and now. So now he's talking about the fluid nature of time. He said this is a constant projection of endless possibilities and experiences intertwined together. As I read more of the post from Dominic, I realized he had asked me if I knew what these patterns were about. I had not responded because I had not taken the time to actually read his post until Stephanie's nudge. Dominic has not seen any of my other designs until he watches this video. And these other illustrations also match his. They're perfectly matched. They're coinciding. They match together. Now that we've seen some of Dominic's designs, he attempts to describe how he receives them. We already know he's been listening to Monroe Sound Science, Meeting More of Yourself, that meditation. And he's probably in focus 10, mind awake, body asleep. He says these are the closest words to explain or describe what he saw. He said a white, glowing space that was rectangular in shape, but without any clear edges. That immediately sounds like my experience. When these designs came to me, I saw a blank whiteboard. Next, for me, the illustrations appear, often from left to right, if it's a formula or a written word, and from top to bottom, if it's a drawing. It's as if an invisible hand is drawing it, but I never see who or what drew them. Dominic says the form is surrounded by endless static. I love this part. Endless static? So what's he describing? Energy, vibrations, frequencies. He then says it's like an old TV and he's part of it. Of course he is part of it. So am I. So are you. When you step into the frequencies of the 5D, you are in that field of energy where everything is connected. Yes, my messengers have also told me that our brains operate like a radio or a TV tuner. We can learn to tap into these outside frequencies, thus truly making us part of the formula, part of the apparatus for receiving this information from the 5D. So Dominic is spot on. He clarifies that he's using the word perceiving because he can't say that he really used a regular sense. He said it was seen, but not with the eyes. It was visible. It wasn't felt on his body, but he was part of it, and part of it was him. He had a, quote, feeling of unquestioned understanding and clarity. He also felt like he was home. Dominic continued saying how separate experiences became one, but they're spread throughout time. When they are aligned, they become whole, and then this makes more sense. He also said that it helps him when he writes down the experiences and how it's not easy to find places where you can share experiences like this. How well I know that to be true. And let me give a shout out to Monroe Institute for allowing us a safe, secure place and a beautiful app for sharing. Returning to Dominic's description of perceiving, and for those who follow me on YouTube or on my podcast, you've heard me state multiple times about how challenging it is to describe the indescribable. When you step beyond the 3D, things change. Your senses expand. Many have synesthesia, where we use the non-physical senses differently than the physical senses. The messengers have referred to these non-physical senses as nonsenses. So I was not surprised to hear Dominic say how difficult it was for him to describe his experience. There is so much to unpack from this. When he described unquestioned understanding and clarity, I thought, what is this? I'll tell you, it is that strongest intuitive sense that we have. Yet it is the most often discounted sense because we think we're making this up. It's that knowing that arises from deep within. You just know things. You can't identify how you knew them, you just know. And that feeling he had of being home, that, dear Dominic, is because you are home. You have begun to step into that field of energy where everything is connected. You exist. You are not part of all that is, you are all that is. And that is part of what your drawings are suggesting to you. And the next part of the chat, Dominic said he was distracted and he started slowly moving down, going back to his physical suit. Now, I can't think of a more perfect description of returning from an out of body experience. For those with a more scientific slant, it's returning from a waveform in a field of energy to a particle form within the body. Being afraid that he might lose the message, he then told himself to move up slightly to reconnect. I have found that many of us have out of body adventures, but we don't necessarily understand that in real time. Perhaps in retrospect, we realize what happened. He describes perfectly returning from his energy body to his physical body, his physical suit. He then says that night that his message dissolves into this physical being. And although he was afraid he might lose the message, he also said that it became clear that the message would not fade and it would open up on its own pace like a flower, slowly opening up and showing the world its beauty. He says it's like this message that must be translated from source. It became part of the physical plane, which speaks in different languages. He said each day it becomes clearer. Now, I have to address two things: the flower comparison, of course, and then something the messengers have referred to as bookmarking. My first message when I spontaneously opened to spirit was about a flower. Let me read that now. When you look at a flower, it is at its peak when it is open. A flower is a flower, just like a human. When you let the energy flow, then the human is open to growth and potential. A plant draws energy from deep within Mother Earth, and then it ascends toward Father Sky. When there is perfect connection, this union between Mother Earth and Father Sky, the plant's energy is in ideal alignment. Its energy is flowing, and there are no blockages. It will then burst forth from its current existence and produce a perfect blossom, a flower. The plant is a flower of energy, and its perfect alignment with source results in a flower. This is also true for humans. When humans allow their energy to flow, they open to potential growth beyond their wildest imaginations. The result is a perfect flower, beautiful, functional, and multifaceted. Let us all be flowers of energy with no blockages. It's all about connecting to source, then opening up. Flowing energy connects you, creating a channel of energy, thus allowing you to bloom, to blossom. Let me talk about bookmarking. Just as Dominic moved back into his physical suit and then returned because he thought he might not remember what happened, you can do this too. Anyone can. In fact, Dominic was getting practice doing that. When I went to the Discovery program at Monroe Institute in February 2023, Judith Pennington talked about this. She called it setting landmarks. The messengers refer to this as bookmarking, and they describe it in very simple terms. Think of walking through a field of deep snow. Each time you go back and forth from home to wherever you're going, that path becomes better defined. So once you've been to one place in the 5D, you can return. The path is there. It's a matter of finding it and following it. Now, I think all this is amazing, and it certainly shows how we're all connected, especially when we begin traveling outside of our physical bodies into that field state of energy. Let me give you another example that just happened. Last week, I attended a local author's book fair here in Naples, Florida, where I live. When I got in my car to go there, I had this very sudden wave of panic as I got in my car. In an instant, I saw my car not starting, and then I ran through the list of who could I call to borrow a car to hitch a ride. I took a deep breath, got in the car, and it started right away. When I got to the venue, the author whose table was set up next to mine told me about getting in her car that morning, and it did not start. She panicked, but then borrowed a car from her mother or her mother-in-law. I laughed and told her my story, but I knew that I had picked up on information from the field from someone else. I had picked up her information. This is a good place to transition to what these designs mean. Some of these slides are part of a presentation I did last week. I shared the message earlier about the flower. That was my first channeled message, and it occurred on August 28th, 2013, as I drove to work early one morning. That was the day that my life changed. The day I crossed into that other dimensional space of spirit, of energy, of the 5D. Turns out that these short early morning drives with no traffic were ideal for receiving messages. I began recording these during the commutes, and soon I had hundreds of pages of typed messages. The end result? Mystical doors opened that day, and they remain open today. I received information from numerous sources. Some would self-identify, some did not. But I started changing. I began viewing the world through the lens of energy. I no longer saw my life through the eyes of a psychologist. My training as a psychologist had taught me these things did not exist. But I was learning firsthand that there was a much larger world out there that I knew nothing about. I realized that we exist not as separate individuals, but more like interactive bubbles that float in a field of awareness. And we can manipulate that bubble to influence time, the past, and the future. Let me share some of that now. It explains how we can dip into this invisible world that surrounds us, but often eludes us. It has to do with time and consciousness. What is consciousness? It's awareness. But once we become aware of our consciousness, aware of awareness, it becomes a tool for self-discovery, for exploration. It can help us lead a more peaceful spiritual life. When I first began channeling, the messengers told me about something they called the POE, point of existence. It's a visual representation of consciousness. Think of it as a dot that resides deep in the physical body. Because it's tucked deep inside, we often think we are our physical forms. My tooth hurts. I stubbed my toe. I am this, I am that, my. Then a day arrives and that particle, that dot, begins to shift, to expand. And that's when we discover we can bend space and time. Yes, bend space and time. The messengers have told me that time is not linear. It's fluid, it's flexible, it's bendable. I used to define time as a progression of our awareness. Think of that dot, that POE, as it moves from one event to another. In my pragmatic world as a psychologist, I thought our point of existence, our awareness, travels along a straight path. That's logical, sequential, moves in one direction only. Time marches forward. But it's more like a curvy sine wave. Now, as we track the progression of consciousness, think of that dot traveling along the pathway. Time gets a little more complicated. The magic occurs when we expand our awareness. How do we do that? Through having a near-death experience, which I hope none of you have. We can expand through prayer, through meditation like Dominic did, listening to the Expand app. We can expand through shamanic initiations, yoga, lucid dreaming. But with this expansion of our consciousness, our awareness, that tiny dot, that particle, morphs into a circle. But it's more than that. It's three-dimensional. It is a three-dimensional globe of dynamic life force energy. Now, as we superimpose that 3D sphere on our sine wave that represents time, we see how expanded consciousness influences our perception of time. We perceive the past. I'm not referring to last week, but perhaps lifetimes ago. We view the future, the probabilities of what might occur. Learning to use consciousness as a tool empowers us. We're no longer tethered to the 3D by our limited 5 physical senses. We slip from a particle state into a wave form, a field of energy that is connected to everything. And as we dip our toes into cosmic consciousness, we taste unity. We are not part of all that is. We are all that is. And we just might realize we are consciousness. Now, let's look at some of the connecting points that Dominic and I share. The two end pictures are Dominic's drawings. The one in the middle is the one I received from the messengers. This drawing arrived when I received a message about creation, when the formless formed. I saw in my mind's eye the formation of a black hole when a singularity crossed an event horizon. But look at the similarities. If you take this picture and realize that circle is a globe, it is 3D, and then you tilt it to look at it from the top, this is what you get. Let's look at something else that's interesting. Compare these drawings to Monroe Institute's logo, the logo that signifies going out of body. So what does all this mean when we step outside of the world of physicality? Yes, Dominic, it does feel like a homecoming because we are closer to our true essence, which is energy. We know that there's more to life than what the physical senses measure. There's that knowing again, that intuitive skill that is all encompassing, giving us information that we know is true. When we are in that field of energy, we feel, we sense the connections. We share in the frequencies and vibrations. This is what allows similar message to be shared, but we each have our own filters from which to gauge and interpret those messages. But when images coincide, there's this magical spark that occurs. And that's when we realize, as Bob Monroe used to say, we are more than our physical bodies. And that realization empowers us to move beyond the 3D. And when we become empowered, we see more. And the universe has an opening to nudge us into spaces we've never been before, including those taps on the shoulder that say, pay attention. There's always a second chance if you're willing to listen to your intuitive side. I hope that you enjoyed this. Remember the importance of kindness. Always be kind and see how your life will change. Until next time, I want to give a special thanks to Dominic and to Stephanie. Goodbye.